Hello everyone, welcome to Smash GED channel. Today we want to talk about scientific method and its steps. The first steps is asking questions, and the second one is the background research. Just imagine, for example, you have a question in your mind and you want to find the answer. The first step that you are taking, most of the time, personally, I go to websites and search it to find the answer. So that actually I'm doing the background research, and then I construct a hypothesis. It means I just predict an answer for the question that I have. Actually, the hypothesis, the word hypothesis means predictions, and the steps after hypothesis that comes after the hypothesis is test with an experiment. It's the experiment, okay? And the experiment should also have the steps, so we can prove that the hypothesis that we have is the correct one. If the experiment works well, okay, we can analyze the data that we get from the experiment and we draw a conclusion. But if not, we should go back to the experiment and change the steps of the experiment so we can test the hypothesis in the correct way. And then if the experiment works well, then we can draw the conclusions. When you want to analyze the data and draw conclusion, the result should align with the hypothesis. It means that the result that we get in the hypothesis actually should be the answer for the hypothesis. And if not, it means that our hypothesis was not the correct one, and the conclusion that we get, it's not, it's faulty. And then the result is not the correct one, we should go back to the hypothesis stage and construct another hypothesis. If yes, it was correct and we get the answer for the hypothesis, we can communicate the result and we can share our experiment with others so others can also do or use the result of our experiment. In the right side, I brought a picture for you that maybe hopefully can make the steps easier for you to learn. The first step is observation. For example, I saw a plant that grew faster, and I say, oh, what is the cause? Why it grows faster? And I say, okay, maybe I should do an experiment, and I see why the plant is taller, why the plants grow faster. And I say, okay, I ask a question from myself. Which type of the fertilizer work the best? For example, I have 3 types of fertilizer, and I ask a question, which type of the fertilizer work the best? And I make a hypothesis for myself. For example, if I choose fertilizer A, B, or C, okay, I should choose just one of them. For example, in here they choose A. If I use the fertilizer A and then the plants grow faster. So my hypothesis is if I use fertilizer A, the plants grow faster. Okay, and then I do the experiment step by step, and I get the conclusion, and that was the hypothesis was proven correct. It means that I use 3 types of fertilizer, and the fertilizer A, the plants that I use the fertilizer A, the height is much taller than the other ones. So I get the conclusion, and I say that the fertilizer A work better. I shall work the best, right? And okay, that's all for the steps of the scientific method. And let's review one more time. The step of scientific method is asking the questions, and then we should do the background research, and then we construct a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a question, is a scientific question, a prediction, I can say. And when we construct the hypothesis, then we should test the hypothesis with an experiment. And the experiment should have steps. And if the steps of the experiment work correctly and the procedures work, okay, that's really good. If not, we should go back to the experiment and change the steps so we can get the answer for the hypothesis. All that matters is that we should find the answer for the hypothesis. Okay, if no, we go back to the experiment. If yes, we analyze the data and draw the conclusion. It means that we get the answer. Okay, we get the answer from the hypothesis, and we say, okay, now it's the time to draw the conclusion. It's the time to find an answer for that, right? We already did the experiment, and we already found the answer, and we say that, okay, we found an answer, but actually, is it a true answer or no? Okay, I said that I should ask this question from myself. Does the answer that I get align with the hypothesis or no? Okay, if yes, okay, your experiment, your hypothesis is true, then you can report the result and you can communicate the result. If no, if the result doesn't align with the hypothesis, you should go back to the hypothesis and make another hypothesis, because the hypothesis that you made, it's a faulty one and you cannot get the answer from that. So you go back to the hypothesis and change your hypothesis, and as a result, you should change the experiment as well. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, in this slide, I brought 7 questions that you should ask yourself when you want to evaluate a scientific investigation or an experiment. The first question should always be the hypothesis. Should be about the hypothesis. What was the hypothesis? You should always have a hypothesis in the experiment. And when you want to make a hypothesis, try to ask if and then questions. Okay, I can say try to write a sentence that has if and then. For example, if I use fertilizer A, then the plants grow faster. Okay, always the hypothesis always should have if and then. These 2 words can help you to make a hypothesis much more easily. If I, for example, if I put a glass of water in the freeze, then I can get an ice after 1 hour, for example. Okay, and the second question that is really important is that what was the independent variables? Okay, and the third one was what was or were the independent variable. You should pay attention to this, that the independent variable, we use the word was, right? And it means that we should have only one independent variable. We cannot have more than one independent variable. Sometimes we can have, but in GED, there is only one independent variable. Okay, and the third question, what was or were independent variables? We can have more than one independent variables, but pay attention that we cannot have more than one independent variables, because it is difficult to determine the influence of each independent variables. Okay, and when we want to, for example, when we want to draw the conclusion, you should pay attention that the result that came from the experiment is from which independent variables. If you have more than one independent variable, you will be confused, right? Okay, and the fourth question is, what were the control variables? Okay, and in every experiment, we should have a control variables. And what does it mean? Control variable is the variables that we should keep it exactly the same. For example, in this slide, we had the fertilizer, right? We want to find the effect of the fertilizer on the plants, right? So what is our independent variable here? Our independent variable is the fertilizer, right? The height of the fertilizer is depends on the type of fertilizer that we use, right? Okay, now we already know that independent variable and the dependent, what are those dependent variable or independent variable? And the control variable is, for example, the amount of the sun and the amount of the water that we gave to each of these plants. They should be exactly the same. For example, you cannot give a glass of water to plant A, but you don't give, for example, you forget to give give water to plant B or plant C. Okay, if you change the amount of water, the amount of water can change the result of your experiment. It means that you have more than one independent variables. Okay, and okay, the control variables, right? You should always keep it the same. Okay, keep it the same. The amount of water, for example, should be the same. A glass of water for each plant. Okay, the amount of sun, for example, you put plant A, B, C in front of the sunlight for example, 1 hour. Okay, 1 hour daily. Okay, for all of them should be exactly the same. For example, 1 hour for A, 1 hour for B, and 1 hour for C. Okay, if you change the time, if you change the duration, pay attention that you make another independent variables that can affect your result. Okay, let's go to the next questions. Were the measurement methods appropriate to what was being measured. Okay, when you want to measure something in the scientific method, the equipments that you use, the steps that you use in your experiment, they should be appropriate. Okay, and the next one is, what's the number of the sample adequate? Okay, what do we mean? Was the number of the sample adequate? It means that do we have enough samples, okay, to represent a general population? Okay, for example, when you want to find the effect of a drug on a group of people, okay, you should choose different people from different race, from different sex, from different ethnics. Okay, it should be and the number of that sample should be adequate. For example, you cannot choose only 10 people from one ethnic and one part of country, okay, to experiment that drug, and then if you get the result and the result was kind of good, and you use it for every people from different ethnics, okay, it means that your experiment in that way your experiment will be faulty, because the number of the sample, for example 10% from just one area, cannot represent a whole population, for example in the world, right? Okay, the next one is, was the experimental design appropriate to test the hypothesis? You should pay attention that the experiment, the steps of the experiment that you write, it should lead you to test the hypothesis. Okay, the aim of the experiment, the aim of the steps of the experiment is only to give you the answer for your hypothesis, for your questions. Okay, and yes, that's all for this video, and thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends. I hope you find it useful, and see you next time.